Welcome. You are listening to Caregiving Secrets with Deborah Greenhut. If you are a family caregiver or expect to be one, and you want to maintain your well-being while caring, then you are in the right place. I am your host, Deborah Greenhut, speaker, author, and rational caregiver advocate. I'm a family caregiving veteran, bringing you survival secrets and experiences from experts who share the goal of doing less by managing more. We need to invent and reinvent family care, and together we're going to do it. My big idea is rational caregiving, and my motto is, let your brain lead your heart. Please share yours in the comments. Caregiving Secrets, because friends don't let friends be caregivers alone. Let's do this. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Caregiving Secret. Today, my guest is Mary Gaul. And fortunately for us as caregivers, Mary has worn a variety of hats, all of which are germane to this caregiving situation. So I want to give Mary a chance to introduce herself, and I'll say, welcome, Mary. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. It's great to be on your show today. Yes, I have been in the caregiver role with family members, with my mom, and we've had siblings that have gone through long battles. And so being the caregiver either in close by or from far away. I also am a business coach, and so I get to work with women entrepreneurs. Many of them are in that caregiver role themselves. So how does being a business owner and a caregiver, work in the same world?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd like to talk a little bit about the caregiving experience first, if that's okay with you. Just
Yeah.
to set a context for it. I know that you mentioned you had cared for your mom, so could you tell a bit about what that experience was like and maybe the connection between what you're doing now?
Yes, yes. So I'm one of 8 children, so I come from a large family. And when my mom had a bad fall, and then we found out she was living on her own, and she lived in Kansas. I'm in Colorado, so wasn't in the same town with her. So when we talked with her on the phone, everything was fine. Come to find out, things were not fine, and she was forgetting that she wasn't eating or wasn't taking care of herself, and then she had this bad fall, and that started our kind of caregiving journey. Like, okay, she's going to need some additional help. And so working with a large family of 8 siblings, right, and a very strong mother, as you can imagine, we had lots of deep conversations about what would my mom want, what can she do, what can't she do, and then walking through that journey with her over the next few years after she was diagnosed with dementia, realizing, okay, she's not safe in her home anymore. Where do we put her where she's safe? And then walking through that transition, and I became the kind of the power of attorney, dealing with all the financial things, selling her house, and doing all of the applications for services. So even though I wasn't, as we called it, boots on the ground in our family, who's the boots on the ground person? I have a sister that lived in the same town, so she did a lot of that kind of thing, running my mom to doctor's appointments or delivering things to her. But then I was able to help how I could from afar by doing more of the paperwork and that kind of stuff, right? And then I made the decision when my mom went into assisted living that I was going to go back and visit her. Because I'm a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, I get to control my schedule. So I was able to say, okay, every 6 weeks I'm going to go back for a 4-day weekend and spend some detailed, deeper connection time with my mom while she was still able to remember. And I interviewed her. I found this book in in her closet about notes for her grandchildren, and I knew she wasn't going to write in the notes, and so I asked her the questions in the book and spent the next 6 months interviewing her, which was such a great part of the caregiving experience for me. When I was home, there are the basic things that we would do, make sure she was bathed and had the medications and doctor's visits and all those kind of things. But then also spending time asking her questions about her past, or what it meant to be a friend, or, tell me about her parents. So that was a really meaningful part of the caregiving journey.
That's an extraordinary experience to have the firsthand look at all of that, because you were doing the interview, but also a gift to give to the future generations. And I imagine your siblings as well, who may not have heard
Yes.
those stories either. So that this goes way beyond the question I was going to ask you, which was about how caregiving is like running a business in a way, because that's an important topic of mine. You can see my book over there is The Rational Caregiver. And that's because I think caregivers are managers first. And that's often the dilemma. How do we set our feelings for the person aside so that we can think straight and do the things that are necessary? And it sounds like you really covered a lot of great ground and were able to divide up the labor among at least a few of your siblings so that it wasn't all one person's job. So what would you like to share about the two possible vocations we have here, caregiving and solopreneuring? And you did them both at the same time. So I'm just
Yes.
very interested.
Yes. I tell my clients this a lot is that we come to our businesses as whole human beings, right? So we bring in that, mom had a fall and I got to get her to the doctor's appointment. So I have to move my clients around, right? So we come as whole human beings with everything that's happening in our lives. And so giving ourselves space and grace around whatever is happening in your life. As a caregiver, you can't always have control over your days, right? Depending on what's going on. So the more, just like running a business, the more you can have systems in place to help things keep running when you need to step away. Same thing with the caregiving experience, right? What kind of systems can you put in place? So when we were still had my mom at home and we were trying to, we were having siblings come in and stay with her 2 weeks at a time or whatever, to see if we could kind of make it work for her to stay at home. We created a checklist. I created a checklist. I printed off. I made it a book. What did she eat for breakfast? Did she take her meds? What's her mood like today? And every day we would fill that out so that then when the next sibling came in, they could be able to look back for the last 2 weeks and see what was happening, right? And make special notes. And so that's a way of running a system or managing, right? So that you have consistent communication across different people. You know what's happening. It's filled out consistently so that everybody's answering the same kind of questions. It's not one person checks off this and one person talks about this, right? So creating some of those systems, just like you would when you're running a business, I think is important. And then that helps take, like you mentioned, there's such an emotional bond with this woman who, raised you or whoever you're caring for. It's hard to not let the emotions take over sometimes. So if you do have those systematic things that you can do that are logical, then that helps you say, okay, at least I'm doing this logical piece and the emotional piece may be up and down all over, right? And there's other ways to deal with that. But I think that's the systems, building a system around is similar to running a business and running, managing and caring for a loved one.
Yeah, that's great. I have a colleague who said that, or she said there are at least 20 systems that a caregiver needs to work with every day, everything from nutrition to medical technology to all the things in between and the emotions and all the human resources. And what you don't
Right.
have as a caregiver is the team usually that will do that with you so you can just coordinate it. But I'm sure in your case, having the other family members involved, the tracking system would be tremendously helpful because everybody's
Yes.
a little discontinuous. And it's like what most of us use a computer to track the things that are going on, but having that log somewhere to know is just phenomenal to have that resource available.
Yeah.
So, is there another way in which caregiving is like being a solopreneur?
Yes. So if I mentioned that I had a big family, and so we all kind of took the jobs that we were good at, right? So in your business, there's things that you're better at doing and things that you're not as good as doing, right? And when you're a solopreneur, you're trying to do all of those things at one point. So the sooner you can find a way to say, I like doing this and I really don't like doing this and I'm not very good at doing this and I want to give that to somebody else that can do it better than me, right? That happens the same in caregiving, right? There are some of us in caregiving that we really like this part of it, or we're really good at organizing all of the details, right? But we don't like clipping their toenails or whatever it is, right? So is there something that you can give somebody else or hire somebody else to come in and do for you the pieces that you don't like to do, and you get to focus on the pieces that bring you energy, are good at you already have those skill sets developed.
Yeah, there are a lot of business-like functions that is helpful to import. For example, you were mentioning tasks that people don't like to do. So if you have a cross-training system, you can have more than you want to be more than one deep in a specialty if you can be, and
Yes.
keeping a log of who's done it the most, so we spread out the work a little bit and it's not always one person's chore, I'm sure is beneficial. So let me ask you one of the touchy questions for either one, the budget. How do you
Yeah.
keep up with your finances for caregiving?
Yes, yes. So it is the same in business, right? You have to know what your numbers are before you know what you can spend. So getting a really clear idea of, so I mentioned I was a financial power of attorney, so having to go through all of my mom's assets and cash in stocks or whatever, and then, spend that down to get her into Medicaid facility. So going through all those numbers, we had to know each month what are her expenses going to be? What do we have left here? When do we need to get her into another program? How's she gonna qualify for that? So really understanding your numbers is key. And if that's not your skill set, then finding some resources, perhaps it's in your book. I don't know, I haven't read your book, but maybe there's information in there. There's lots of resources and tools where you can say, okay, if my parent has this many assets, what do we need? How do we need to best manage those, right? And there are people you can pay to do that. There are some free resources for that. But knowing the numbers is key, just like knowing the numbers in your business is key. If you don't know what your expenses are and you don't know how much revenue is coming in from your clients or your services, then you're just guessing and you're living by what's the balance in your checking account, and that doesn't do you any good because that changes all the time, right? So we really need to know those numbers.
Yeah, so being able to do a little long-term thinking about finances is critical for whether you're a business person or you're managing the business of your parents' caregiving. I know when both of my parents died within about 2 months of each other, and before my dad passed away, he was the second one, I had discovered that my mother had spent down all of the cash, anything that was liquid. So there was a house, and there were two houses actually, but I couldn't extract any money from them.
Right.
He was living in one, and he didn't want to move, and there's just so much chaos. So the more I think you can communicate, which is another business strength, communicate
Right.
with the people around you and find out. My parents were very secretive and they were afraid I'd make them move in with me, which is probably what should have happened, but they wanted their independence and they got it. But then
Right.
my brother and I were left with, now what do we do? How do we solve this problem? Because it was more, than either of us was comfortable trying to advance at that time.
Right, right. And I think there's such a power in having those conversations. And many people don't want to talk about money, right? And they don't want to share their personal stories or what they own and those kind of things, even with direct family members. But the more you can do that or have it documented somewhere in one place, it's taking the burden off of the remaining family members so that they know and they can help you deal with it while you're alive. And then, when you pass, then it makes it easier for them to deal with all those assets as well. So we've lost both my parents and two siblings, one in a sudden way and then one in a long battle with cancer. Again, another kind of remote caregiving role that I took on and helped support the boots on the ground people, right? So the more you can have those conversations earlier on, the better off everyone is, just because that open communication allows you to deal with what you have to deal with, right? Whether there's a lot of money or a little money, you still have to deal with it somehow, right? So knowing what that is helpful.
Yeah, I found that handling an estate was a little like putting your parents' assets into a business only to take them out and pay the taxes or distributions or whatever you had to do,
Right.
unwinding the same business you just assembled in terms of explaining to the tax people what you had, which is
Yes.
something that wasn't done before in our case. So sometimes people will have better records than than others, and that's tremendously helpful. And in fact, this might interest some of your listeners too. There is a specialty, a geriatric social worker, who can take on this financial management piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
So that's a great solopreneur type of job to have. And it's a fairly high earning profession. So not everyone can even afford to consult one. but it's really helpful if you can. They can show you what you're in for, and also
Right.
to community resources or county resources or state resources, which I'm a little concerned we're going to lose a lot of those now, but
Yeah.
hopefully somebody will take an interest and try to fund those in another way, because everybody can't afford everything that is.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And there are so many free resources available too. So if you find yourself feeling like we can't afford to talk to anyone, I highly encourage people to research what they can find. Even at their local library, there's lots of free resources available. So there is some help. You don't have to go through it alone. Even if you feel like you are alone in this, but as you know, there's so many caregivers out there, and it's not going away anytime soon. I think it's 10,000 people turn 65 each day in this country. So it's we're going to need more and more caregivers. So again, better communication, the better you can make your communication, putting some systems in place to be able to help yourself and help those who are going to care for you is so vitally important.
Yeah, and if you can keep yourself mentally and physically healthy by not overworking yourself and taking advantage of resources, you will have a
Yes.
longer life than you might, because caregiving can be pretty destructive. And I don't want to say
Yes.
self-destructive, but that's essentially what's happening if you can't put a stop to a relentless pressure like that. So
Yeah.
I want to touch on one other topic. Grief is often the end of caregiving. That's often a piece of it. And even for people whose carees survive the experience, there's a grief in letting go of this big bond that you have formed with someone, whether they are going to continue to live or not. But there's something perhaps in it for us to understand about a business setback that might be helpful here. What do you say to how do you help people handle a business setback?
Yes. We just had this conversation this week. I facilitate peer advisory boards for women entrepreneurs, which are like small mastermind groups, right? Where we create this safe space where we can really ask questions and show up as our flawed human selves, right? Not everything's perfect and my business is wonderful, right? Because we are human beings. So in the conversation, one of the women asked, she had lost some clients over this last quarter and her revenue was down. And so she asked the group, how do I not tie my worth as a business owner or my success to what's in the bank account, right? And we get that kind of, things are great at one point and then we have this ebb in our business and things are not so great. And it's almost like a grieving process, right? Where you have to say, oh, I was riding high last year and then this year, for whatever reason, the economy, competitors, whatever it is, right? My business is not doing so well. So how do I move through that, not blame myself, not feel I'm a failure, but still moving through that? So we really helped her redefine what is the impact that she's having in her business. She is still serving her clients that she does still have. She's making a huge impact in their lives, in their daily lives. And so going back and reminding her of this is what success is, not just about what's in your bank account, right? What else brings you joy? What else do you love about being your business, owning your business? The freedom to go pick up her kids after school or take them to summer camp, the freedom to care for her parents, right? And be able to take vacation and go see her parents. So those kind of things we had to remind her are all part of the success equation and not just it has to be this number in the bank account or I'm not successful, right? And so just knowing that those are swings, just like you can't control your grief, right? It shows up when it's going to show up and how it's going to show up. So you can have some tactics to kind of manage it, but it's something that's kind of out of your control a little bit. And there's no timeline and it ebbs and flows and you might be fine for a couple months and then you kind of go back down again, right? So that same thing happens in business. And so I think it's just knowing how do you pull yourself through? How do you get connected to what's really meaningful for you in your business? And then that, as long as you're still aligned with that, then you can keep moving through those lower points.
And you also gave me, excuse me, two great takeaways for caregivers. What gives you joy? Because surely if you love that person, something does there that you can hold
Yeah.
on to. and also being able to help other people. That's exactly what you're doing. So we have
Yes.
a lot of those components that are shared by solopreneuring and caregiving, and they're probably a lot more similar than we might have thought at the beginning.
Yes.
So this was kind of an experiment for me to see if we could put them together, and I think they fit together pretty well.
I think they do. Yes.
So I'm going to ask you, since we're very close to our ending of time here, our time on the podcast, not our ending of time,
Yeah.
but could you tell me a bit more about where we can reach you and what resources you have available that we can put in our show notes later, but people can hear about it right now?
Yes. The best way is to just find my website, which is www.successmagnified.com. Successmagnified.com. There's all kinds of resources on there. There's free tools. There's my books are on there. You can book a call with me if you have a business and you want to talk something about around your business where you're feeling stuck. Or if you just need to celebrate and talk to somebody about your journey as a caregiver, I'd love to do that as well. I love to be able to support people. So all of that can be found on my website, successmagnified.com.
Thank you. That's so very kind of you to open your heart as well as your store of knowledge that you have available for people. I'm going
Yeah.
to ask you one more time before we go. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today?
Just remember that when you are caring for a loved one, you are doing sacred work, right? That bond between you and your loved one is special. And even if they don't show it and they can't express it, they know that you're there, and it makes a big difference. And just keep going. There's going to be dark days. There's going to be days that you can find little things to celebrate as well. And so I encourage you to find and focus on those celebrations along the way that you can remember once that person is gone, or if they're moved through their caregiving journey, right? So just remember, you're doing great work. They do appreciate it, even if they can't express it, and find something to celebrate every day.
Mary, that's beautiful. I thank you so much for being a terrific guest today. You've given us so much great information to move forward with, and I look forward to talking with you again sometime. And may your business thrive, and may the people you serve thrive as well. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you for joining me today on the Caregiving Secret. I love sharing insights and stories to empower you on your caregiving journey. If you like what you hear, you can dive deeper by picking up a copy of my pamphlet, Non-Negotiables for Caregivers. Go to my website, deborahgreenhut.com, and click on the link for Non-Negotiables for Caregivers. Until next time, keep sharing, keep caring, and remember, you're not alone on this journey. Thank you for listening.